Hey everybody, I'm Spencer Ehrenfeld, and welcome to the next edition of the Trust Me, I'm a Lawyer podcast. This is a podcast that focuses on interesting lawyers, law students, law professors, judges, and people who spend their time in the law. Today I'm joined, as always, by our executive producer and our co-host, Nori Ehrenfeld. Hey Nori.
Hello everybody, welcome.
How you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling a lot better. Yeah.
Thank God. Nori's been in isolation because, unfortunately, you want to share the news?
I've been contacted by somebody with the virus, so I got infected.
Oh. And how are you feeling, buddy?
Very good. Basically back to normal.
Back to normal? Well, we're thrilled that you're here, and I'm especially happy because we have a very special guest with us today who has a remarkable story to share. Nori, tell everybody who our guest is.
Today we have a lawyer, Haley Moss, who is more than just a lawyer, in fact. She's a lot of things. An artist, an autism advocate, and public speaker, and really like an inspiration for me as I learn more and more about her. So I'm truly excited.
And for me too, she's what you call a multi-hyphenate because there's a lot of hyphens after her name as the things that she does. Welcome to the podcast, Haley.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you for a number of reasons, as Nori has alluded. You do so much, and you've accomplished so much in such a short period of time. You're an inspiration to old and young. Would you mind sharing with everybody a bit about your journey and how you got to be where you are today?
I feel like we could probably be here all day telling that, but
well, we booked the whole day.
So I think probably the simple version is you have to understand that I was diagnosed with autism back in the late 90s, and it was just a very different time. So we didn't really have the conversation that we're having today, where we hear these statistics of 1 in 54 kids. The internet was still in its infancy, as a lot of people tend to forget, is our resources weren't quite what they were either. So when my parents first heard autism for the first time, it was definitely something new. It was something that was a little bit scary. So thanks to our wonderful friends at the University of Miami, I was able to get some help, and they were able to get guidance. And they were told originally with me that I'd be lucky if I made a friend, if I graduated high school, if I got my driver's license, all these different things. And when you think about it in retrospect, it sounds kind of ridiculous to put these kinds of expectations and goalposts on a 3-year-old, but that's a whole other story, I think.
Well, for people who don't know, Haley, including myself, what exactly is autism? How is it traditionally diagnosed? Is it treatable? What is it?
So I think the really important thing to understand is every autistic person is different. So while autism is a developmental and neurological disability, every single person who has it is different. If you've met one autistic person, that's exactly what you've met. We're all very different. So for some people, you might see folks who also have an intellectual disability at the same time. You might see people who are non-speaking and might communicate through an iPad or just typing, but most of the hallmarks seem to be struggles socially for a lot of us, and also a lot of just differences in communication. So the way that I experience the world is different. So the things that affect me most are things that are like staying on task, getting things done, things like honestly being able to live on my own sometimes. Certain tasks for me are really difficult, and social stuff kind of just isn't natural. So it's like speaking a different language at times. And I know that I just experience the world differently, and sometimes the world seems like a very loud and busy place.
Well, it does to me too. And they talk about the spectrum of autism. And what are your thoughts about that?
I think it definitely is a spectrum, but I don't think you can really grade it as a linear thing. So I don't really like the idea that there's people who are like high functioning and people who are low functioning, because it kind of boxes us in, and it tends to box us into our own detriment. So people who get labeled as low functioning, people don't account for the things that they're really good at or can do. And when you're labeled as higher functioning, as I have been throughout my life, the people discount that things can actually be really hard for you. And they kind of fall into this box of, well, you have a disability, but not really. You can do it. You're talking, or you're this, or they have this very singular picture of what autism is, rather than that there are things that, like anybody else, that you could be really, really good at, and things that could just be really, really hard.
Well, we know you graduated from law school, but would you tell us a little bit about your journey from 3 years old to how you ended up at the University of Miami?
So I think we got to fast forward a lot. So I ended up going to the University of Florida for undergrad. I majored in psychology and criminology. I graduated early in 3 years. So I was at UM, and I went to UM right after my 21st birthday, which is
Wow.
kind of a scary thought, is thinking about entering law school when you're 21 and you're still just experiencing the world. And I think about that a lot now. I'm like, wow, I've realized like how young I really was going through law school. And I went to law school mostly because I knew that I wanted to make a difference for other people. I was really excited about that. I love to write, I love to talk to people, and I know whatever I have to do has to make a difference for others. So that was where I was really going with that. And I thought that I was going to be doing disability policy or something. I really didn't know what I was going to be doing. And I love disability policy, but that wasn't what I did straight out of law school. And that's totally okay. And I think that's the best thing, is that you get to kind of explore your way through and figure out what you're going to do. But either way, I knew whatever I do, I have to make a difference for others.
So, and you graduated with law school. Was law school difficult for you?
Law school is difficult for all the different things about law school that aren't necessarily the reading. And people always kind of laugh when I say that, because like, isn't law school really hard? And like, law school is hard in its own special way. Law school was hard for me because it's the first time I had an apartment. I had to figure out how to balance like doing my laundry with doing the work and making sure that I was and also just adapting to a different learning style. So I'm not someone who does really well with the put me on the spot Socratic method. I thought that was very anxiety inducing. Everything was auditory information when I usually need things very visually. So trying to adapt and figure out how to accommodate myself and my brain was definitely one of the harder parts of law school, but eventually I settled into a rhythm. But I think the problem with law school is it doesn't always necessarily cater to different types of learners. Right. And there are ways that it should be and could be a lot more accessible.
Did they make any kind of efforts to accommodate you in terms of the testing with either the law school exam or the bar exam?
I took the same stuff that everybody else did.
And you were able to complete, elements and property and contracts, all that stuff, and you took those finals with everyone else?
Absolutely.
Amazing. And how about the bar?
It's the same work. And I tell people this all the time, especially when I do get asked about accommodations and reasonable accommodation, is it's not that they're modifying the material. You're not getting an easier exam or something if you do receive accommodations for any disability. You're leveling the playing field. So it's like if you wear glasses and I ask you to take the test without glasses, you're going to have a much harder time. So for some people whose brains might process differently, they might need extra time on that test, or they might need a quiet space to be able to focus. So I think when we talk about accommodation, we need to keep that in mind, is it's not necessarily making the tests easier or making them in plain language, even though I think everything should be in plain language and it would make things a lot easier. Like, can you imagine if we had court opinions that were written at like a 5th grade reading level? It would be so much more pleasant and so much more accessible to so many non-lawyers and other people.
Absolutely.
Just a thought.
It's a great idea. Did they give you some accommodations though for taking the bar? No. So you sat in that big room in Tampa.
It was really scary.
Oh, it was scary for me too.
And in hindsight, I wish that I had requested accommodations, but I didn't know what was available. Like, I think that's something that we get told a lot in law school, is we don't really know what's really available to us to make things more accessible.
Well, UM has a program. I'm sorry, Haley, go ahead.
And I think with students with disabilities, a lot of it is you spend a lot of time figuring it out yourself, and there isn't really that much to help guide you in those conversations. And especially with lawyers, like, we're really good at advocating for other people, but it's a lot harder to advocate for yourself.
UM doesn't have a liaison that would help students with disabilities?
They do. And they got a new person probably around sometime in my 3L year.
And hopefully that helped.
I think it depends on what your needs are. And I think by that point in my law school career, I was like, I got this. I know what I'm doing. It's 3L,
So you graduated law school, you passed the bar, and then what?
I took my first job after law school. I was practicing in healthcare and international law. And I left right around New Year's to start my own business, because at the time I was really excited because I was speaking around the country. I was getting invited to all sorts of conferences talking about autism and neurodiversity and trying to help make the workplace a better place. So a lot of the things that I enjoy talking about happen to be neurodiversity at work. So making sure that we're including people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, ADHD and the like at work, because oftentimes these folks go unemployed or underemployed. So trying to fix that. And even as it relates to the law. So I was like, I really want to do something for my community. So I left and I started speaking more, and I started consulting with companies and whatnot about ADA policy and making sure that we're able to have this talent, because we shouldn't be people that are sitting at home. We all have so much to offer, and business does better when we work with all kinds of minds. It's better to the public and it's better to the business. It's not the morally correct thing to do. It's the only thing to do.
Well, I'm convinced, I own my own law firm and have owned one for about 30 years. I'm convinced that some people on my staff, even lawyers, are on that spectrum. What can I do as a law firm owner to make them more comfortable and more productive? What types of things can I do?
So again, every person is different, but I think some of the things that worked really well for me were having quiet space and even the ability to take breaks. I remember the first time I was asked to write a motion, it was like, go do this. And I found it really overwhelming. And what we ended up doing is we broke it down into smaller assignments, so it felt a lot more manageable. So sometimes knowing what to prioritize could be hard. So even just knowing, okay, start with the statement of facts, then do the analysis, then do this part, and this is what you should be kind of trying to get towards, made a lot more sense to me. So I wasn't just sitting there like, oh my God, I have to write this 30-page response, and you hit a brick wall and all of a sudden 4 hours go by and you realize you wrote 3 words. And it's not that you didn't want to do it. And I think that's something that, and also I do really well with details as well. So I always spend a lot of time trying to analyze things. And I think about something my dad likes to say to me about how my brain works is that a lot of people see things very like black and white. They see like an x-axis and a y-axis. And sometimes when you are neurodiverse or you have a brain that works differently, you sometimes see that z-axis that goes through it, that 3D, that extra pattern, that extra something. And in a lot of cases as well, that could be something you might not have considered. So it ultimately benefits all of us. So I think a lot about in firms that if we had this understanding and not just punishing people for being less, or not realizing like there are different ways to be productive and different little tiny things that you might not have to do something super formal or super expensive to do. Most accommodations don't cost anything. Any accommodation I needed when I was at work didn't cost my employer anything. It was pretty amazing. Like honestly, even just getting to wear headphones, and as long as I could hear the phone ring, it was not a problem. But it helped kind of like minimize that office chatter that would distract me, certain things like that. So it's just creating an environment, I think, that people feel comfortable sharing with you, and also just being able to support them so that they could work the best that they can and also be happy and healthy lawyers.
So there's one particular member of my team who I adore. I mean, I love my son, but I love this kid, or this gentleman who works for me probably almost like a son, is that he will get stuff done on time, Haley, but he will wait until the last freaking second to get it done. So if it's due today, he will file it with the federal court at 11:55 tonight. So it prevents us from reviewing it and talking about it. But he never is late, but he doesn't get things done until the last second. What advice could you give me in this situation to help him become more time responsible?
So I think it's an executive functioning issue is what it sounds like to me. So being able to prioritize and understand it's not that he's just trying not to do it. Is I think sometimes it gets really hard to sort through the tasks. So what I like to do is I always set a soft deadline or something else. Like I'd set that deadline like 3 or 4 days before and say that's the deadline, and then you can review it then, and it gives a little bit of leeway. So every time I have a deadline in my calendar, I write it down for a couple days earlier, and then I know if I don't meet that, it's not the end of the world. And also then I'm more likely to get it done on that time frame. So I've already established if it's not in my calendar, it doesn't get done, because I can't keep track of all those different balls in the air in my head. Most of us can't. But if it's not written down, it doesn't happen. So I try to put those deadlines, I try to purposely move them up. Even though it might make a little bit more pressure in the moment, it makes it so if my brain and my executive functioning system doesn't do exactly what I want in that moment, or something else comes up, I don't have to beat myself up for it later. So then I might get that extra day to review it, or I might get that extra day to sleep on it or think about it. And then, of course, by the time that real deadline comes, everything's already taken care of.
It's so funny that you mentioned this, Haley, and so many of the things you've said describe him and me to a T. He always puts in these, what he calls internal deadlines in the calendar, which completely throws us off in the firm, because we're like, wait, the statute of limitations is today? He goes, no, that's just my internal deadline. The statute of limitations is in a month. So
Yeah, the internal deadlines help because then it gives everybody else time, and then it also just kind of creates less stress on me, at least, because I do that a lot. Like, I'm currently writing a book, and my hard deadline is probably a month later than what I set internally, because I want the extra month just to review and edit and do all these other little things before it goes up, before I send my manuscript off. So like all these other little things keep me on track too, and it keeps me on pace and it keeps me accountable. Instead of just sitting there trying to get this manuscript done the entire manuscript finished and polished the day before, even though I probably will send it in the day before.
No, congratulations. Congratulations. Nora, do you have any questions, buddy?
I do. I think, the law stuff is really great, but I'd love to hear more about your artwork, because for me, that's like the more intriguing part of your career. No offense, but the arts are law stuff.
Totally.
Tell me about your art, please.
I think art is a lot of fun too, so I don't blame you whatsoever. So a funny story is I was first known actually as just being a teenage artist. So it's really weird being like an adult sometimes, because I started drawing when I was a little kid, and I started painting in my teens. And at one point I had my artwork at different shows and galleries and all this other stuff. And I really just enjoyed drawing and painting. It's something that always kind of gave me this respite from school, where I didn't always feel like I fit in and struggled making friends and these other things. So I kind of would like escape into my own world in a way. And I absolutely love that. I try to use bright colors. I want to make people smile. I'm very influenced by like pop art and anime and things that just make me smile, and I hope that I could pass that on. So that's kind of what I try to do. And I also love to donate a lot of work in order to raise money for different causes and charities. So I try to make it feel like a win-win all around, because that's how I feel art should be. It makes me happy to create, it makes someone else happy to view it or own it, and if I can have it benefit a cause that I care about, then it also makes the people who are benefiting from that cause happy too. So I like to think of it as a multi-faceted thing that can bring a lot of joy to people.
Have you, as you become more and more of an adult professional in your life, found it difficult to, fit in your passion of art into, having deadlines and stuff to do as a lawyer?
It is, but I try to fit in more time for it. And even at my desk, I always have papers and pens nearby just in case I have that moment. Or I also realized, I don't know if this happened to anyone else in school, but I would also like doodle a lot because it would keep my mind active. And sometimes I would have these really cool looking stuff, like doodles at the end of a class. And I remember being in high school in U.S. history, and I would doodle the entire class, and my teacher like hated it. And I thought I did really well in class because I doodled all the time. And then eventually she'd see the grades and she'd be like, whatever, you just do you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, because you have a lot of messages. I think it's important for a lot of people to hear.
Thank you for having me.
We loved having you. Thank you so much, Haley. We wish you the very best. You've certainly made us smile today, and I'm sure you'll continue to make anyone who has the opportunity to hear you or meet you smile as well.
Absolutely. I hope we finally get to meet in person sometime, because I'm like, I know who you are. I've passed your building plenty of times.
Well, actually, we're no longer in that building. About a year ago, although the name's still on the outside, about a year ago we moved to a penthouse on Alhambra.
Okay.
And now with this COVID virus, this is my my new office.
That's a great office, though.
I told my office administrator, just close my office down. I'll just work here in the patio until forever.
See, I think that's like I think that's really cool though. But I do, and I believe you worked with Rihanna and Peyton, because I'm like, I know them from Rihanna is one of my dear friends from law school. So
we love Rihanna, and so I didn't know
we all love Rihanna.
She is a spectacular person, and we work with her closely at Lawyers to the Rescue. She told you about that?
Yes, because she's one of my favorite people. I'm actually she and I talk about what I'm working on with my book all the time, and she's like, I want to help, and I'm like, I wish that I had more stuff for you, but I will do what I can.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Haley. Thank you,
She's such a passionate human.
She is.
And I love her for it.
Us too. So thank you, Haley, so much for joining us today. It was a very, very important and powerful message that you have. Nothing can stop you, Haley, and we're big fans.
Oh my God, I'm a big fan of you guys too.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nori.
Thank you.
It's just keeping busy.
God bless. Stay safe.
All right, you too.